He was an arrogant businessman who once believed he could have everything. She was an ordinary woman with nothing but dignity and a pair of calloused hands. He lived above the clouds of the city, inside million-dollar boardrooms, rooftop parties, swirling wine glasses, and handshakes laced with power. She lived on the other side, in the narrow alleys of Brooklyn, where the hum of sewing machines echoed like a heartbeat, where dreams were muffled by bills and responsibility. Two people, two worlds, they were never meant to meet. But fate doesn't wait for an invitation. It all began on an autumn night, when New York shimmered under golden lights and the air brimmed with possibilities. A lavish party in the heart of Manhattan, where tailored suits mingled with silk gowns and laughter carried a sharp edge. She didn't belong there. She came only to clean, to move quietly like a shadow. But his eyes saw her, and the game began. A game no one expected would lead to real love, then heartbreak, then hope. The high-rise building hosting the party glimmered like a kaleidoscope in the heart of Manhattan. Electronic music blended with the clinking of glasses and the refined laughter of New York's elite. On the glass-covered rooftop, Nathan Grant, CEO of Grant & Co., one of the city's largest real estate firms, leaned against the balcony, a glass of scotch in hand, scanning the room with the calm of someone who was used to winning. At 34, Nathan was the man everyone looked up to. Polished, confident, wealthy, powerful, and with a past no one dared to dig into. But behind the handshakes, the smiles, and the custom-tailored suits was a hollowness he had never named aloud. "You're bored, aren't you?" Lucas, his college friend, said as he joined him, swirling his drink. "You've got everything, Nate, but nothing excites you anymore." Nathan gave a dry chuckle. "Got a suggestion?" Lucas smirked. "See that girl over there?" He pointed toward the corner where a young woman knelt, scrubbing the floor, her dark hair tied back, her uniform wrinkled. "Cleaning up, quiet, invisible. Try charming her." Nathan looked. She wasn't like the women in his usual orbit. No body-hugging dresses, no heavy makeup, no flirtatious glances. Just real. "And if I succeed?" Nathan asked, raising an eyebrow. "I bet you can't make her fall in love with you. Not sleep with you, love you. A bottle of Louis XIII, if I'm wrong." Nathan studied the woman again. Something about her held him, a stillness in a chaotic room, something that made this game not feel like a game. "Deal," he said. "But if I lose, I'll leave her alone." Lucas laughed. "Fair enough." And so, under the shimmering lights of Manhattan, a game began, one that would change everything. Nathan wasn't the impulsive type. Every move he made was usually calculated, like a game of chess. But this time, he wasn't operating with strategy. He moved with curiosity. The next day, he went to the event agency responsible for the party. No one expected the CEO of Grant & Co. to personally inquire about a contracted worker. After a short lookup, he got her name, Lina Moreno. The following week, he accidentally ran into her again, this time at a city-sponsored community event in the Lower East Side. Lina was helping set up the backdrop, wearing a faded jacket and carrying a heavy toolbox. Nathan approached, calm but certain. "Hi," he said, voice deep and gentle. She turned, her gaze cautious. "Yeah?" "Nathan Grant." She paused. The name registered, but she gave nothing away. "What do you need?" "I'm working." "I know. I'm not here to bother you." He smiled lightly. "Just wanted to say hello." She nodded politely and turned back to her task, but her eyes passed over him once more, quickly, but enough for him to notice. From then on, Nathan began showing up where she usually went, once at a used bookstore in Brooklyn, another time at a small cafe near the subway. He didn't push, he was just present. At first, Lina was wary, but slowly, through those brief encounters, they started talking. Not about work, not about the past, just simple things. "What books do you like? You drink black coffee? What did you dream of becoming before all of this?" Lina said she once dreamed of opening a small tailor shop somewhere near a quiet park, with morning light streaming through the windows and plants by the sill. but life pulled her away. Her father died young, her mother got sick. She dropped out of school, worked multiple jobs, stitched every seam to pay hospital bills. Nathan listened, never interrupting. He was amazed at the calm and kindness in her voice. No complaints, just acceptance and quiet dignity. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he said once, softly. Lina gave a half smile, half wary. "You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it to flatter you. I'm saying it because I want to understand you." She said nothing, but something in her eyes shifted. A tiny crack, a first opening in the wall she had spent a lifetime building. Love didn't arrive like a summer storm, sudden and loud. It came like the early autumn wind, gentle yet persistent, slipping through the cracks, built slowly across mornings of quiet glances and soft nods that turned into small, reluctant smiles. There was no grand moment between Nathan and Lina, no confessions. Just a gradual shift. He began waiting for her at the subway after work, walking with her through East Village. They shared a cheap sandwich, a cup of hot chocolate, and sat on the curb talking beneath dim streetlights. Nathan told her about his childhood in Queens, in a ground-floor apartment that smelled of old paint and echoed with upstairs footsteps. Lina shared memories of her mother's sewing machine, where she learned to stitch her very first straight line. Once, it rained. A gray, bitter New York rain. Neither had an umbrella. They found shelter under the awning of a laundromat. Soaked, hair clinging to their faces, they laughed, as if it was the perfect date. "You know," Lina said, "I can't remember the last time I laughed at something so stupid." Nathan looked at her. "Maybe today's the first of many more." She didn't answer, but the walls in her eyes had thinned. That night, Nathan invited her over, not to his luxurious penthouse, but to the old Queens apartment he never sold. No housekeeper, no vintage wine, no polished marble, just 2 mugs of tea and soft jazz. Lina hesitated, then stepped inside, sat down, looked around. "This place feels real." "Like you," Nathan said. And in that moment, the space between them dissolved. Their first kiss came like breath, not rushed, not planned, a light touch, a held hand, and then melting into one another like it had been waiting all along. They didn't say much. Their bodies spoke, the things words couldn't. Nathan touched her the way someone turns the pages of a cherished old book, carefully, reverently. Lina let him, as if someone was finally seeing the soul she had hidden for so long. That night wasn't about desire, it was about tenderness. A night when both knew this was no longer a game. Lina never believed happiness would choose her. But with Nathan, things felt different. Not because of gifts, he never gave her any. Not because of promises, he made none. But because of how he showed up, patient, gentle, and real. He listened without interrupting. He remembered the smallest details from her stories. He didn't try to fix her, he just stayed. And for the first time in years, Lina felt seen, touched, loved. So when it all collapsed, it didn't fall like a punch. It broke, like a quiet, spreading crack, then shattered in silence, without warning, without rescue. That afternoon, she stopped by the events office in Lower Manhattan to submit an invoice. A light drizzle soaked the shoulders of her coat. Her hair was messy. She intended to drop off the papers quickly, but there was a delay. They sent her to a back room to wait. The door was ajar, and then she heard it. "Remember that bet Nate made during the grant party?" "Oh, hell yeah, he said he could make the cleaning girl fall in love with him, and looks like he won." Laughter erupted. She recognized one of Nathan's friends. She'd seen him briefly at an event. Should teach a class, from CEO to Romeo. Honestly, didn't expect her to fall for it that fast. Another voice chimed in, mocking. "She totally looks like someone who still believes in fairy tales. Probably thinking, oh, he's so different." More laughter, longer, sharper. Lina froze, like ice. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears, and inside her chest, something broke. A soundless shattering of trust. It wasn't the bet that undid her. It was the fact that Nathan had never said a word, that through every moment together, every kiss, every gaze, he let her become the punchline of someone else's joke. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure of every moment she thought was real, every smile she thought was hers, and realizing she had been the story others laughed at, that broke her in a place words couldn't reach. She stood, walked out, no one noticed, no one stopped her. At home, she closed the door, took off her soaked shoes, and sat on the floor. Silent. Nathan's messages poured in. "Are you okay? I'm waiting outside. Lina, please say something." She stared at the screen, blinking, her hands steady but her soul shattered like a mirror hitting cold tile. That night, she didn't sleep. She packed quietly, one small suitcase, a few clothes, a sewing kit, a photo of her mother. She turned off her phone, left a note for her landlord, and at sunrise boarded a train out of the city. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to leave the place where love had turned into humiliation. And she didn't know that inside her, a tiny life was already taking form, quiet, like the heartbreak she now carried. Albany wasn't a place Lina ever thought she'd live. It was smaller, slower, quieter than New York. No dazzling lights, no towers scraping the sky, but it offered something she needed more than anything: peace. She rented a small back room in an old house owned by Miss Marjorie, a widowed black woman who agreed to weekly payments. The room barely fit a single bed, a worn-out wooden table, and a small window that looked out onto a backyard. But for Lina, it was the first shelter no one could take from her. She found work at a local sewing shop where people didn't ask many questions, only cared that you sewed fast, and didn't complain. In those early days, Lina worked in silence, survived on egg sandwiches and tap water, returned to her room at dusk, lay alone in the dark, listening to distant traffic. Then, one morning, the nausea came. Once, then twice. She thought it was exhaustion, but when dizziness followed and the smell of food turned unbearable, she walked into a small pharmacy near the train station. On test, 2 lines, clear, undeniable. Lina sat on the back step behind the sewing shop, holding the test with trembling fingers. She stared at it as if willing it to disappear, but the line stayed. Red, bold, no one beside her, no arms, no one to cry with, just her and the tiny life beginning inside her. She didn't know what to do, no plan, no savings, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't walk away. The months that followed were hard. Lina kept working until her belly started to show beneath loose shirts. She kept her secret as long as she could, but by the 5th month it was too obvious. Some coworkers pulled away, a few gave her pitying looks, but the shop owner, Dolores, just looked at her and said, "Want to take a machine home? I'll lend it." So Lina kept working from her tiny room. She set up the sewing machine on the old wooden table, stitched late into the night, one hand on her belly, whispering, "You have to be strong. I promise I won't give up." When her belly grew bigger, another surprise came: twins. She nearly cried when the doctor told her, but not from fear, because she couldn't believe her cracked heart now held 2 new heartbeats. She named them early, Daisy for peace and Sam for light, simple names for the only 2 reasons she kept getting up each morning. Being pregnant alone was something Lina never imagined, let alone carrying twins. But she had no choice except to keep moving forward. The early months left her exhausted. No one held her hair back as she leaned over the sink, nauseous. No one massaged her legs after 8-hour shifts at the sewing shop. At night, as cramps tightened her belly, she curled on her old mattress, holding her stomach, whispering, "Stay calm, babies. Mama still has to work." She learned to measure everything with precision, every cent spent, every step avoided to save energy, every minute of rest carefully counted. Meals were modest: dry bread, broth with greens, a single apple as a treat. But she didn't complain. As long as those 2 tiny heartbeats kept pulsing, every sacrifice felt worth it. By her 6th month, Lina could no longer work at the shop. Thankfully, Dolores, the owner, let her take a machine home. So Lina sewed at her wooden table under a dim bulb. Her back ached, her hands numbed, her feet swelled, but she worked anyway. Because she knew she wasn't just one person anymore, she was 3 lives in one body. When it was time to deliver, she went to the hospital alone. She signed her own surgery papers, and she welcomed 2 tiny souls into the world alone. Daisy and Sam, rosy-skinned, feather-light boys, screamed into the recovery room. Lina wept with them. Not from pain, but because for the first time, she wasn't alone anymore. After discharge, she carried them home to her narrow room. 2 small cradles made from cardboard boxes lined with cloth diapers hand-washed nightly, formula donated by a community program. Every night, she rocked one baby to sleep while the other cried. Her eyes bruised, her limbs shaking, her body sore, but her heart burned bright. She had no riches, no husband, no family, but she had love, pure, unconditional, unshakable. And she reminded herself, they are light, I must be the path. 3 years had passed. Lina was now a steady mother, not always strong, but strong enough not to fall. She sewed clothes from home and worked part-time at the local library on weekends. Daisy and Sam were thrilled, mischievous, clever, and always able to make her laugh no matter how tired she was. Life wasn't easy, but it was stable. No one knew who the father of her children was, and Lina felt no need to tell. To her, the boys were the best part of a once broken life. Life has a strange way of circling back, almost like the universe decides you must face what you once ran from. That day, Lina only planned to take her boys to the children's festival at the community center. She didn't expect much, just hoped Daisy and Sam could get their faces painted, eat some cake, run around like other kids. She wore an old coat, a knit hat, and tied her hair up. Motherhood made her prepared. Single motherhood made her cautious. She had no idea Grant & Co. was the main sponsor, even less that Nathan Grant would be there, not as a suited CEO, but as a man handing out toys with an awkward smile. The moment Lina saw him, she froze, as if time drained from her body. That face, those eyes that once made her believe in what she shouldn't, now made her stomach tighten. She turned immediately, pulled Daisy and Sam close, hid in the crowd, but Nathan had seen her. He stood, stunned for a few seconds, then started walking toward her. Slow, careful, like stepping through a memory that still burned. "Lina," he said. She didn't respond, just glanced at him, eyes cold like winter glass. No anger, no tears, only distance, thick and unspoken. "I didn't expect to see you here," Nathan's voice wavered. Lina looked down at the boys. "We're allowed to be anywhere," she said, not meeting his gaze. Nathan stayed silent. He didn't reach for her, but his eyes locked on the 2 little boys. The hair, the eyes, the way they walked, all too familiar, like seeing a reflection of himself as a child. Only this time, with a mother who wasn't him. "Are they?" he asked softly. "None of your business," Lina said firmly. Nathan stepped back. He didn't push, but he didn't walk away. Lina turned and led the boys out of the area. No looking back, but when they passed a corner, she glanced over her shoulder. Nathan was still there, watching. He didn't call after her again, but his eyes said something else. Not pride, not regret, a quiet ache that had no name. That day, Nathan didn't return to his office. He stayed after the festival, asked the community center staff for names, then visited the library manager, then the old sewing shop where Lina once worked. He didn't go seeking forgiveness. He went because, for the first time in his life, he wanted the truth. Not to win, but to understand how he'd lost. The one thing that might have mattered most. Nathan didn't search for Lina with grand gestures, no knocking at her door, no flowers, no dramatic emails. He chose to stay right where she and the boys lived, grew, and breathed. The week after the festival, Lina saw him in the children's art class at the community center. No fancy clothes, no mention of his title, just a plain t-shirt, old jeans, sitting cross-legged on the floor, showing kids how to mix watercolor. Daisy, the more curious one, spoke first. "What's your name?" "Nathan." "Can you draw a dinosaur?" Nathan smiled. "I can try." And so, every Wednesday afternoon, Daisy and Sam grew eager for art class. Nathan taught them how to draw superheroes, fire trucks, and smiling suns. The paintings were messy, but the laughter was loud. Over time, they started calling him Uncle Nate. Lina watched from a distance. At first, she said nothing, didn't interfere. She wanted to see how far he'd go, how long he'd last. And he didn't stop trying. One day, Sam slipped while playing ball. Nathan was the first to rush over, scooping him up, gently wiping the scraped knee, whispering comfort. Lina stood there, heart tightening, watching his hand cradle her child like it was his own. Afterward, he didn't say anything, just looked her away, with eyes no longer filled with arrogance or charm, but the eyes of a man who knew he had been wrong and was willing to relearn how to love from the beginning. One evening, as Lina walked the boys home, it started to rain. Nathan covered the boys with his only jacket, letting the wind soak his back. He said nothing. When Lina looked over, he didn't meet her eyes, but his hand held Daisy's and Sam's firmly. And in that moment, for the first time in 3 years, she didn't turn away. She looked at him clearly and saw something she didn't expect. He had truly changed. No longer the Nathan Grant of years past. No more pride, no more games, just a man trying, inch by inch, to be worthy. Late afternoon in Battery Park, the sun spilled gold over the Hudson River. It wasn't cold, but the breeze was enough to settle the heart. Lina sat on an old stone bench, eyes on the distant Statue of Liberty, her fingers gently gripping her bag strap, a habit she hadn't broken. Nathan arrived slowly, not rushing. He wore a light gray shirt, hands empty, no flowers, no gifts. Lina didn't turn, but she recognized the sound of his steps. She had memorized it long ago in the years she thought she'd forgotten. He sat beside her, keeping just enough distance, not too close, not too far. "Thank you for meeting me," Nathan said. Lina stayed quiet. "I want the truth." Nathan nodded, his voice lowered. "It's true. It started as a bet. Foolish. Cruel. I thought I knew everything. But then you showed up, and you weren't like anyone I'd ever met. Every word, every look. It scared me, because for the first time, I stepped into something real." Lina kept her gaze forward. "And then, you said nothing, let me be the joke. Then disappeared." "I can't justify that," Nathan replied softly. "I deserved to lose everything." A pause passed. Waves lapped gently. Children laughed in the distance. "I'm not here to ask for love again," he said. "I'm only asking for one thing, to be part of Daisy and Sam's life, not out of duty, but because I love them in a way I never knew I could." Lina turned to look at him for the first time. Her eyes held no anger, but no forgiveness yet either. Just a woman who had weathered a storm, now standing before a decision, not for herself, but for her sons. "Do you know, being a father isn't just showing up," she said softly. "It's patience, endurance, listening, even when you're not allowed to speak." "I'm ready," Nathan answered without hesitation. She exhaled, a long, quiet breath, as if releasing 3 heavy years. "Then I'll give you a chance, but I promise nothing." Nathan nodded, and his eyes lit up with something gentle. Not hope, but gratitude. Nathan never promised to fix everything overnight. He only promised to show up every day, every hour, and he kept that promise. He left his sleek Manhattan office and moved to Albany. No mansion, no private driver. He rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment near the Central Park, close enough to pick up Daisy and Sam each afternoon, far enough not to overwhelm Lina. He worked remotely, opening a small local branch and handing over corporate control. He wanted to start again, and this time, start right. Lina stayed cautious at first, but when she saw him show up in the rain without a coat, waiting patiently outside school, or sitting at Sam's hospital bed for hours, she began to believe, not because of words, but because of quiet, steady presence. Then Nathan did what no one required. He filed for legal adoption in the local courtroom. In front of the judge, he declared that Daisy and Sam were family, responsibility, and love. No DNA needed. The judge nodded. Lina teared up, and the boys clapped when they heard the word official. Love between Lina and Nathan didn't return in a single moment. It came back as a process. It was dinner together, 3 plates of spaghetti and a bowl of salad. It was Nathan fumbling with Sam's shoelaces or reading fairy tales so wrong that Daisy couldn't stop laughing. It was a brush of hands while setting the table, a glance when both kids fell asleep on the couch. One spring evening after a parent-teacher meeting, Lina turned back at the porch and said, "Thank you for not giving up." He said nothing, just pressed his lips to her forehead, and that was their first kiss. The second time around, months later, Lina had news. She was pregnant. This time, it came with a smile. A baby girl. Daisy wanted to name her Hope. Sam preferred Luna. In the end, they chose Leonta, a blend of Lina and Nathan, a family in every sense. The wedding was simple, held in the backyard of a small church. Wooden tables, string lights, a 2-tier cake. Friends, neighbors, co-workers from the library and community center came. Daisy and Sam wore tiny suits, proudly carrying the rings. "We're holding them," they said, "so Dad won't drop them." Laughter rang out. Lina wore a plain white dress. Nathan wore a blue tie, the color of her eyes. They exchanged vows at sunset. No flowery speeches, just one promise. This time, it's forever. The next morning, sunlight filled the little kitchen. Coffee brewed in the corner. Daisy and Sam fought over pouring milk into cereal. Leanna slept peacefully in a crib by the window. Lina flipped toast at the stove. Nathan cradled their daughter with one arm, stirring coffee with the other. Laughter echoed. Spoons clinked. Light filtered through the white curtains. And just like that, after everything, love wasn't something they found, it was something they built, through forgiveness, patience, and faith.